Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. We just started on the last video on a book about the Queen Mother, and it was entitled The Queen Mother. And it was fun finding out about Elizabeth's early days and idyllic childhood. So we're going to find out more about her today. Elizabeth's father got a car, and the quiet horse days were over. Elizabeth said that it was huge. It made a great deal of noise, and you couldn't hear what the other person was saying. And it would go uphill only if it was going backwards. She said she remembered her father sitting on the back seat, tapping on the window with his stick to the chauffeur, saying, "Take a run at it." Elizabeth said that the grooms didn't always make good drivers. Waldenbury and the summer days in Scotland, the boys played cricket, and at Glamis they did shooting, and in August and September they shot for grouse, and September-October for partridges. Horses and carts took the guns, that was the shooting party, and then they went up to the moor, and the keepers would walk. The evenings were lively. The castle was lit by hundreds of candles, and there were immense fires. There was dinner in the grand dining room, and after dinner the family would go to the drawing room, where there were logs burning in the fireplace. Lady Strathmore played the piano, or one of her daughters did. They would sing traditional Scottish ballads or popular songs of the day like "Would You Like Me for a Father, Marianne?" So there was a sad event that happened to Elizabeth's third brother, Alec. He was badly injured at Eton when a cricket ball hit his head, and it caused a tumor. And when Alec had gone shooting near the end of his life, he wrote in his game book that he had to stop shooting early because of headaches. Alec died in his sleep in the early hours of October the 19th, 1911. He was 24 years old. May 1912, Elizabeth and David were at St. Paul's, Walden, without their parents, and they were busy with the lessons. David got a bicycle for his 10th birthday, and Elizabeth was a bit envious. She said it was so hot today that it was uncomfortable. She wrote in her diary that David was getting on very well with his bicycle. "I do wish I had one. Do you think it would stop me growing if I had one? If I only rode little distances?" All Elizabeth's brothers went to Eton. For girls, it wasn't the norm yet for them to go to boarding schools. Lady Strathmore taught Elizabeth and David to write and introduced them to drawing as well as music and dance. But she thought they needed more than just her teaching then, so she had a series of governesses and teachers at home and attended a day school in London. Elizabeth and David were also sent to dancing classes in London. Elizabeth showed an early talent for dancing. In her 20s, she was noted among her contemporaries as an exceptionally good dancer, and she took to the floor all her life at every opportunity. And she had music lessons at Madame Verne's pianoforte school. She had a good ear for music. One day, however, there was a difficult lesson, and Elizabeth had enough, so she said to the instructor, "Thank you very much. That was wonderful." And she held her hand out in a polite farewell, but the teacher got her back to the lesson. September 1912, when David was 10, he was sent to St. Peter's Court Preparatory School in Broadstairs. Elizabeth was sad, and she didn't want him to go, and she missed him terribly. But she had a teacher and a companion named Kathy Kubler, and she was amazed by Elizabeth's love for her mother. She would call through the house, "Mother, darling, where are you?" And every morning when she woke, she went to her mother's bedroom, where they would read a chapter of the Bible together. Elizabeth got happy when she learned her brother was coming home, and she said that Arthur Duff had given her a new pony. The pony was 16 years old, but she said he was awfully good still. Kathy Kubler went to Glamis with Elizabeth and her family, and one day Lord Strathmore took Lady Elizabeth and the governess to where he was shooting. The pheasants were put up by the beaters, and the guns must be good shots, she said, because the pheasants flew high above the trees. And then there was fly fishing for trout in a stream that flowed through the park. After the holidays, when David went back to school, Kathy began drilling Elizabeth for the Oxford local preliminary examination. Elizabeth started to get pale and thin. Elizabeth's mother made them stop and said with a smile, "Health is more important than examinations." Elizabeth, though, ended up passing the examination and was awarded a certificate, and it's still preserved at the Glamis archives. Lady Strathmore asked Kathy to stay 4 more years until Elizabeth reached 18 to teach her languages, music, and the history of art, and even take her abroad to Germany, Austria, and Italy. David, he didn't like Kathy, and he picked quarrels with her every chance he got. Things were getting tense around them. But Kathy didn't leave because of David. It was because there was World War I. Kathy went back to Germany to attend her parents' silver wedding and take her month's holiday. And when the month was over, it was too late for her to return, and she volunteered for the German Red Cross. So World War I in Britain, there was patriotism and a sense of pride in the achievements of the empire and the supremacy of the British Navy. They felt if they didn't enter the war, Germany would dominate all of Europe. So there was some hesitancy also, but they knew there might be disastrous consequences, but it might be just limited. And when Lord Kitchener called for 100,000 volunteers, the result was instant. 2,500 men a day were volunteering, and in London 100 men were sworn in every hour. Elizabeth's 4 brothers, Patrick, Jock, Fergus, and Michael, felt there was no alternative but to join. Patrick was already in the Scots Guard, and Jock and Fergus were in the Black Watch, and Michael volunteered for the Royal Scots. When the declaration of war started, Glamis didn't have all the fun things that they had done previously. Glamis was converted, like other great country homes, into a hospital, and they received wounded and sick soldiers who went there to get well. Beds were put where the great table was, and many of the men had never seen a place like Glamis, and they were astonished. The billiard room was a collecting depot for winter clothing for the soldiers, and the billiard table was stacked with thick shirts and socks, mufflers, belts, and sheepskins to be made into coats and painted with waterproofing varnish. Socks were packed with presents of cigarettes, tobacco, pipes, or peppermints in the toe. Elizabeth remembered during the first few months of knitting, and making shirts for the local battalion for the 5th Black Watch. Her main job was crumpling up tissue paper until it was so soft that it no longer crackled to be put in the linings of the sleeping bags. Lord Strathmore was involved in war preparations. He chaired the local territorial defense associations and was charged with instructing farmers and landowners in the county what to do with their crops and livestock in case of invasion. During this time, Elizabeth got a new governess. Beryl Poignan became a friend throughout Elizabeth's teenage years and an important confidant thereafter. Lady Strathmore was dealing with 2 convalescent hospitals. She had the other one set up at St. Paul's Walden. She had 4 sons at the front and a husband and 2 daughters to maintain at home. So having Beryl around was a relief for her. The governess and Elizabeth got along well from the beginning. They had a daily routine, chapel and piano practice for Elizabeth, breakfast 8:45, 2 hours of lessons followed by 3/4 of an hour outside, and a further hour's lessons before lunch. Then they were free to go out again until the last lesson from 4 to 5. There was family tea around a large table at 5, Elizabeth's last meal except for an occasional apple, until her bedtime at 8 o'clock. So this added up to 4 hours of lessons a day and 3 on Saturday. Beryl said it wasn't easy teaching her. She had to make things interesting or Elizabeth would get bored. She felt that Elizabeth was intelligent, but her education, she thought, had been rather quaint. Lady Strathmore didn't feel Elizabeth needed to learn advanced math, and Beryl was relieved because math wasn't her strong point. So Elizabeth, she enjoyed the time learning. The governess noticed that Elizabeth was interested in the world around her and would grab the Daily Mail. And the governess said that Elizabeth had a loving relationship with her parents. They were devoted to her, and she was very attentive to both of them. She said that Lord Strathmore was a gentle, humorous man. He was very fond of his children and grandchildren, especially of E. She was very sweet with him, and she would look around to see if he wanted anything, and she would light his cigarettes, etc. He always seemed to arrive late for meals. Lady Strathmore and her daughters dressed simply. She was mostly in black with lace ruffles. Elizabeth usually wore a navy blue dress with white yoke and cuffs, often with a jacket like her sisters. Every now and then letters would come from the sons on the front. Lady Strathmore heard that Patrick and Jock were in northern France, where the 5th Battalion, the Black Watch, had come under fire. They had taken German trenches, but they didn't advance. Jock wrote that they usually spent 3 days and nights in the trenches or longer. When they were relieved, they had to walk 9 miles out of enemy artillery range before getting rest. He said he hadn't seen a mattress since leaving Dundee. Sleep was impossible at the front. As an officer, he had to remain alert because they were only 200 yards from German lines. It was also very cold, and there was slimy mud in the trenches. Jock was disappointed when some of the cooked pheasants his mother had sent him had been badly packed and rotted before they arrived. So the Glamis cook got to cooking more, and they sent more pheasants to him. Fergus became a captain, and he was at Aldershot to train new recruits in the 8th Battalion. That was in the Black Watch. In the spring of 1915, he went with the battalion to France. He wasn't sent to the front, but to Rouen. He sent cheerful letters home. He said it was a beautiful city full of fine churches, and he had the task of censoring soldiers' letters home. Elizabeth was still in touch with Kathy, who was in Belgium, and she was nursing German soldiers. Kathy said that she was convinced her country's cause was a righteous one, and that the Kaiser had done all he could to stop the war. Elizabeth wasn't impressed, and she wanted to give up her German lessons and learn Russian instead. Beryl, though, didn't know that language. So I'm going to end the video here. We see that Elizabeth was having an idyllic time in her early days. She missed her brother, though, David, when he had to go to school. And in the meantime, she learned lessons at home and nearby, and she learned her lessons as well as music and dance. Things were merry until the war struck, and both her home fronts became hospitals. Her brothers went to the war. It seemed like everyone was trying to do their parts during this time. In the next episode, we will be with Elizabeth as the family goes through World War I, and we'll see what they're up to next. I hope everyone enjoyed the video, and if you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, it would be greatly appreciated. I hope that everyone's been having a good day. Tune in again soon for another episode of Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. Thank you. Bye.